Om Aganati Manandasyangarangana Salakya Chaksuran Meditam Yanatasmai Srigare Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Yana Bhutare Sayam Rabhakaramayam Darati Swaparandikam Bandeham Siguru Siyata Parakamanam Srigaran Vaishnavam Sta Sirupam Sagaram Sahagana Daganatam Vitam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sayitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shibishikan Vitam Sam Narayanam Namaskritam Naram Jevanarotamam Devam Sarasatam Vyasam Tato Jayodhira Nishta Prayashu Bhadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya Bhagatiyotamashoki Bhakti Bhavati Naistaki Nigamaka Paragariram Param Shukamakaramita Javisamitam Pibata Bhagavatam Varashamara Mahora Horishikabubi Babakaham Krishna Sadama Bhagade Dharmigavni Hesha Karanasta Dishamisha Paranako Dunoditam Nama Om Vishnu Paraya Krishna Pasaya Bhutare Srimadi Bhakti Vedanta Swami Janamane Samaste Sarasati Devi Gauravani Patarine Nivashesa Sanibari Paskata Desarari Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Giradhar Shiva Sari Gaur Bhakti Vrindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Rama Hare Hare. Welcome to Transcendental Tuesday, or TT, as we in the inner circle call it, right, Anjali? Jimmy, Taruni, thank you for joining us. Bye, Bobby, my better half, my significant other, Rupa Manjari. Dayaniti, thanks for coming back again and again. Joe, appreciate your joining us on Transcendental Tuesday. There was still so much left unsaid about the verse that we discussed yesterday. We're going to go back to it. I see Anjali approves with some emojis. Thank you so much. If you've got it before you, and we have to give a shout out to Prashant. I don't know if he's joined us yet or not, but he practically picked up every single scriptural quote and gave a link to it. So those are very good resources. He even found the biography of Radhika Raman on Wikipedia and posted a link to that. And I'm just going to hit that too as a highlight here in the beginning of our talk. And once again, the verse is the 36th verse, 3rd chapter, 1st canto of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, the beautiful story of the absolute truth. You ready? Here we go. Savayidam Bisham Amoga Lila Sijaditi Avati Ati Nasajante Shmin Bhuteshu Chantarhiha Atmatantra Shad Vargikam Jigrati Sadguneshaham. The Lord, whose activities are always spotless, and the word for spotless is Amala. That was basically our title yesterday, and we're going to talk more about our own personal purity today. The Lord, whose activities are always spotless, is the master of 6 senses and is fully omnipotent with 6 opulences. He manifests the created universe, maintains them and annihilates them without being in the least affected. He is within every atom and is always independent. And this verse, which we quoted yesterday, was so nectarine. I have to repeat it today to review what we did and to make a link between where we ended yesterday and where we're beginning today. This is from the Adi Leela, 2nd chapter, 2nd verse. We had the link from Prashant yesterday. It says, "Oh, my merciful Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu," as you know, Chaitanya is the devotional incarnation of Krishna who appeared 500 years ago to start the Sankirtan movement, the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Oh, my merciful Lord Chaitanya, may the nectarine, Ganges, water of your transcendental activities flow on the surface of my desert-like tongue, beautifying these waters of the lotus flowers of singing, dancing, and loud chanting of Krishna's holy name, which are the pleasure abodes of unalloyed devotees. These devotees are compared to swans, ducks, and bees. The rivers flowing produces a melodious sound that gladdens their ears. I just had to repeat that to you again today. And in the commentary, Prabhupada says that whatever knowledge exists in the world is present in this flowing Ganges-like nectarine river of Srimad-Bhagavatam, the beautiful story of the absolute truth. It's 20,000 verses, which Sukadeva Goswami recited to the king Maharaj Parikshit during the last 7 days of his life. Throughout the entire last week of Maharaj Parikshit's life. He sat by the bank of the Yamuna, listening with rapt attention to the Ganges water of nectar about Krishna's activities and pastimes flowing from the mouth of Sukadeva Goswami. And it said that the nature of these topics is compared to the fact that the Ganges flows from the higher planets to the middle planets through the lower planets. It flows throughout the universe, being the causal spiritual ocean, purifies upper, middle, and lower. Similarly, as Sukadeva Goswami spoke, he, the speaker, became purified. As Maharaj Parikshit listened, he, the recipient, became purified. And there was a great assembly of sages who had gathered to attend Maharaj Parikshit during the last days of his life. They also heard, they were Nastiki brahmacharis, many of them, just by hearing once, especially spiritual topics, they would remember them verbatim. They then, after the passage of Maharaj Parikshit, dispersed to all corners of the world. And that's how this beautiful story, the Absolute Truth, got disseminated. One sage, Sutta Goswami, went to Naimisharanya, to another assembly of sages that were presided over by Sanaka Rishi, and then he repeated what he had heard from Sukadeva Goswami. So it says that the 20,000 verses of the Srimad-Bhagavatam says, whatever knowledge exists in the world is present within those 20,000 verses. It includes literature, poetry, astronomy, philosophy, religion, and love of God. And Srimad-Bhagavatam is the Paramam Amalan. Remember, Vyasadeva had compiled all the Vedic literatures prior to the Srimad-Bhagavatam. Those Vedic literatures covered the 4 areas of material life: artha, economic development; kama, sense gratification; dharma, righteousness or religiosity; and finally moksha, or liberation. But Vyasadeva still sat despondent after having compiled all the Vedic literatures. Then he was approached and advised by his guru, Narada Muni, to write one more summum bonum, to write his ultimate commentary on the Vedas, which is the spotless story of the Absolute Truth, and to put nothing in there of artha, kama, moksha, and dharma. Present in the most forward way the motive of undivided, uninterrupted devotional service to the Lord. After having covered all the areas of alloyed service, alloyed activity mixed with mental speculation, fruitive activities, finally at the end, this Dharma Protito Kaitavo Tanimatsaranam Vedam Vastamata Vashtam, this purest of all Puranas, all scriptures, was generated by Srila Vyasadeva. And in that literature is contained everything that you need for both material and spiritual success. We cited the example yesterday of Radhika Raman. Ravi Gupta was born in this neck of the woods, you might say, up the road in Idaho, of his parents, Ananta Rupa Das, who worked for Hewlett Packard in Boise there, and his mother, Arudha Dasi. He was homeschooled along with his brother Gopal. The curriculum was based on the Srimad-Bhagavatam. Reading, writing, astronomy, astrology, English comprehension skills, critical thinking, debate, and communication, as well as Sanskrit. And then math and science were embarked upon as separate subjects. So he became academically accomplished. He enrolled in the Boise State University there at the age of 13. And on the first day, the professor, and this information is sent to us thanks to Prashant, who gave us the link to Wikipedia yesterday. He entered Boise State University at the age of 13 with his only educational reference material being the Srimad-Bhagavatam. The first day, the professor of the English department sent Ravi to the honors writing course because all the introductory courses were full. And he recalls, at the age of 13, Ravi writes, "At first I was so intimidated by the curriculum. Rather than contemporary novels and storybooks, it was full of classical literature like Shakespeare, the Iliad, and the Odyssey. But everything changed when I realized how similar they were to our own epics in many ways. Homer's Odyssey, spoke about valiant warriors and their code of ethics, just like the Mahabharata. And the conflicts Shakespeare's Hamlet faced were very similar to those of Arjuna in the Bhagavad-Gita. So he adapted, and 5 years later, at the age of 17, he left the university with a degree in philosophy, a BS in mathematics, and the university's highest honor, a silver medallion. As far as his postgraduate education and career were concerned, we have this information. He graduated from Oxford University at 22 with a doctorate in Hindu studies and was one of the youngest students to gain a PhD from this university. He was assisted in his studies by the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies, run by a Krishna devotee named Sanaka Rishidas. From there, he moved to the University of Florida, Gainesville, to teach for a year. In 2006, he became assistant professor of religion at Center College in Kentucky. 2008, he became assistant professor of religion studies at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. Promoted to associate professor in 2011. In 2013, he became the Charles Reed Chair of Religious Studies at Utah State University in Logan, Utah, where he has lived and taught since then with his wife Amrita Kalian. He has 2 boys who are also looking like they are emerging stars in the sky also. He was given a full professorship in 2016. Now this boy was homeschooled based on the Srimad-Bhagavatam. He's received 4 teaching awards, the Rookie Professor of the Year at Center College, the David Hughes Award for Excellence in Teaching at Center College, the Alumni Fellowship Award at William and Mary, the Teacher of the Year Award at Utah State University. That's the Teacher of the Year of all departments. He was also chosen by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops to greet Pope Benedict XVI and presented a gift to him on behalf of the Hindu-American community during the Pope's visit to the United States. He's the author of the Chaitanya Vaishnava Vedanta of Jiva Goswami, co-editor of Bhagavad Purana, Sacred Text and Living Tradition, editor of Chaitanya Vaishnava Philosophy, Tradition, Reason, and Devotion. Let's see, my pad just flipped to the away from the wrong place here. He's the author of numerous journal articles in Chaitanya Vaishnavism and Vedanta philosophy. He won in 2016 the Best Book Award from the Dharma Academy of North America. And he's currently he's the department chair of the Department of Religion at Utah State University. We see him quite often because he passes through from Logan to Boise, where he visits his parents on the weekend and holidays. So we can often talk him into stopping and giving a talk in the Salt Lake City or the Spanish Fort Temple. So this is someone, a practical, living example of someone who was homeschooled simply on the basis of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. He's not the only example, but he's the one with which we're most familiar. A truly saintly person. And the thing about Dr. Ravi Gupta, which if you come to know more about him or listen to his many talks online, is that although his IQ, his intellectual capacity, his conversancy with Vaishnava literature is off the charts. When he speaks very down to earth. He speaks in such a simple way, using such simple language that any layman, any first-timer, any seeker can immediately comprehend the truths that he is communicating. Truly a unique, wonderful individual, one of my heroes of faith. So purification is required. There's no better way to be purified than be taken by your parents under their wing and trained up based on the Srimad-Bhagavatam. Grammar, critical thinking, debate, philosophy, theology, but most importantly, builds your character. As we said yesterday, David Hume, one of the greatest educators of all time, said, you teach not by your precepts, but you teach by your example. You teach not by what you say, but you teach by who you are. And the Vedic system of education was that the teachers were the people with the highest character. Their characters were so high, in fact, they did not take salaries. They taught as a service to the community, and at the end of the semester, the students would give whatever donation they wanted to give, and the teacher would happily accept that. So they were not compromised. They didn't have to go on strike. They weren't interested in higher wages. They didn't have any vices or bad habits that they practiced on the side. They were shining emblems of pure character to their students. And that's, after all, the most important component of education. If you cannot bring up and educate each successive generation in the highest principles of morality and integrity, then, as Prabhupada criticized the education system, it's just a slaughterhouse. It's just sending people in to learn material subject matters, which then become tools for exploiting and polluting our world and our atmosphere, and formula for defeat in life: repeated birth, death, disease, and old age. The human form is uniquely given as a springboard to go back home, back to Godhead. So if we simply Nevrita Tarshaeru Vigiyamana Bhavo Sharo Chotomananrana Ka Tamashoka Gavananap Pamambaraja Tabina Bashaka. We uniquely, amongst all the 400,000 species of life, Ka Utamashoka Gananabat, we are the ones who can praise and honor the Lord by reciting the Srimad-Bhagavatam, associating with the great saints and sages who appear throughout the pages of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. We are uniquely situated amongst all the species of life to develop, to take our consciousness and our character to the next level, and at the end of life to go back home, back to God. Failing to do that, Rishabdesh says, Parababash Tabara Bodhi Jatu Yabagna Jinishadma Tadbam Yabad Kriyat Tabara Domone Karmatmakam Yenasadira Bandha. Failing to develop a taste for hearing about the glories of the Creator, of our Supreme Father, one's human form of life is defeated. Doesn't matter if you become the president, the prime minister. Doesn't matter if you have millions of dollars in your bank account. If you do not have a attraction, if you do not, as a result of this human body, have any inspiration towards glorifying the Lord, then your whole life is wasted. And however much money you may have in the bank, however big a residence you have, however many vehicles and chauffeurs and airplanes you have, next life there's no telling. It's quite likely that due to the weight of those opulences and the sinful activities that one had to perform to get them, that one's next birth will be in an extremely unfortunate, miserable, and lamentable condition. Second canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, Para Param Pata Kiridajastam Apyataman, Savo Korona Kuritela Shabbat, Halele Sat Kanchana Kanchanava. So what is the value of the big, heavy crown, which is the symbol of sovereignty? In the water, when you're wearing a heavy crown or a thick spun cloak of imperial sovereignty, when you're in the water, the only thing that's going to happen is that those are going to weigh you down. The cloak is going to get waterlogged, and the weight of that crown is going to take you from the top to the bottom. And it says, what is the use of all kinds of decorations and ornaments on the hands of a dead man? So similarly, all those material successes, material opulence, material positions, not only do not stand one in good stead at the time of death, but they literally drag one down to the lowest sada sat yona janmashu, to the lowest situation of life. Purusha Prakriti in 13th chapter of Purusha Prakriti Stohi Bhankti Prakriti Karanam Guna Sangasha Sadasat Yona Janmashu. If one takes the blessings, the opulence, one takes the talents and the abilities that God has given you and then parleys them into wealth for oneself, fame for oneself, opulence for oneself, then all of those ill-gotten gains are simply going to be like an anchor around your neck. We all used to see on the TV shows about the gangsters. They would dispose of someone by taking them out in a boat. The person would be knocked unconscious, and when they woke up, their feet were in a bucket, and the bucket was full of concrete that had become hard, and then they would just drop them off the side of the boat, and they go right down to the bottom. All wealth, all opulence, bank balance, stock portfolio, all sorts of material acquisitions and accumulations, if they're not used, if it's not recognized that they come from the Lord and they need to be used for the glorification of the Lord and for the improvement of one's fellow man, they serve no more purpose than simply to take us from the top to the bottom very quickly, very rapidly, very precipitously, very traumatically at the time of death. Now, the option is Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Povitam Paramam Purusham Sasadam Divyam Aride Majambirum. The option is to recognize Krishna as the supreme pure, to establish him as the goal of our energy, our life force, our talents and abilities. As Arjuna said, you are the supreme personality of Godhead, the ultimate abode, the purest, the absolute truth. You're eternal, transcendental, original person, unborn, the greatest. So what is suggested here is that rather than divert ourselves in the valuable human form of life, pursuing indirectly the Lord through his various energies, trying to usurp the position of the Lord by carving out for ourselves a position of influence and sovereignty, better simply recognize that the Lord is a supreme pure, make him our goal, our destination, recognize him up above us, like the sun shining in the sky, and aspire to go in the direction of purity and selflessness so that when we can mix and mingle and associate with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, ultimately going back to home, back to Godhead. Now, the sure, tried and true method for your own purification is to surrender to the Supreme Pure. Just in the same way that Arjuna, after recognizing that Krishna is the supreme abode, the supreme purifier, he says, Sarme tamaditam manye, in the 10th chapter of the Bible, Yanman Vedasi Keshava Naite Bhagavan Vekam Bidur Devan Manava. Krishna, you know everything. You created all the demigods, the sun, the moons, and stars. There's nothing that's unknown to you. You know the past, the present, and the future. Well, I'm just going to surrender unto you. I'm just going to let you chalk out your plan for my life and just follow that. So whatever you've told me, I just accept that unqualifiedly, unconditionally as truth. I remember one poem, it says, my life is but a weaving between my Lord and me. I cannot choose the colors, but he worketh steadily. Though he often weaves sorrow, and I in foolish pride forget he sees the upper, and I the underside. Not until the loom falls silent and the shuttle ceases to fly will Krishna unroll the canvas and reveal the reasons why. The dark threads are as needful in the weaver's skillful hand as are the threads of gold and silver in the pattern that he has planned. Krishna's ways may twist and turn, my heart may throb and ache, but my soul has no concern, because he makes no mistake. There's so much I cannot see, my eyesight far too dim. Who am I to disagree? I'm just going to trust in him. Though the night be dark and the light take forever to break, I'm going to put my faith in him because he makes no mistake. And by the mist will lift, the foggy night will fade, and the rising sun will make it plain that he made not one mistake. That's the mood of Arjuna. Recognizing that Krishna is the supreme, omniscient, omnipotent, and the supremely pure, Povitam Paramam Bhavam. Arjuna wants to close up the gap between him and him. Arjuna wants to shelter in the shadow of Krishna's loving affection, and so he offers himself and is prostrated obeisances at the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so when we approach Krishna, we're putting impurity, we're putting contamination, we're putting sinful activities behind us, because the very nature of Krishna is that he's antiseptic and prophylactic. Prabhupada gives the example of a public urinal. There's nothing more obnoxious. There's nothing more contaminated. There's nothing more foul-smelling. You might think it's irredeemable. There's no way this stinky, horrible, awful place could ever become pure. And it may take some time, but the action of the sunlight on the impure urinal gradually over time will extract and burn away the impurities. The sun itself, because of its unlimited power, will act in an antiseptic and prophylactic way. So it doesn't matter. Don't take yourself out of the game. Don't line yourself, oh, true, I've made too many mistakes. Time has passed me by. I'm too old. Nothing good ever happens to me. all my best achievements and everything are behind me. There's not much out in front. No, no. Think of Krishna as the sun. And remember that however impure you might be, you're not so impure that you're beyond the power of Krishna's sun-like grace and mercy to rehabilitate and restore you. In the first canto, second chapter of Srimad-Bhagavatam, Prakash Srinbatam, key pivotal verse for us Vaishnavas. We hang all of our hopes on this verse and verses similar to this. Srinbatam Shakata Krishnam Punya Sravanam Kirtanam Ridanshtoshtu Ibanani Vidunoti Saritadam. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as well as being far removed from us in his own abode, Goloka Vrindavan, he's also diffused himself so that he resides within the heart of every living being, of the truthful devotees, of the devotees who are on the progressive path of purification. He is their benefactor. He especially takes care to cleanse the desires for material enjoyments from the heart of what's called satam, the devotees who have developed an urge to hear his messages, and those messages are in themselves virtuous and purificatory when purely heard and chanted. Prabhupada uses the word here. The Lord is reciprocally respondent. Nice alliteration there, would you agree? The Lord is reciprocally respondent to his devotees, and one of the reasons for that is that he's more anxious to take us back home than we are to go ourselves. I think you'll agree with me that a survey of humanity in general would reveal that very few want to go back home, back to Godhead. Most are fixed and determined to stay here, to continue to chew the chewed, to continue to live life of polished animals, devoid of any sense of God consciousness. And even those who are quasi or pseudo-religious, their thrust is to engage the Lord in their service. They want to be the Lord's, and they want the Lord to be their servant. So at the end of the day, out of the entire human population of the planet, only a very, very few men want to go back home, back to Godhead. Manusyanam Sahasreshu, 7th chapter, Bhagavad-Gita. Manusyanam Sahasreshu, thousands of men, Kashyad Yatati, Yatataram, Kashyad Mam Vedi Tatpadaham. Thousands of men, you'll hardly find one who's interested in higher life. And thousands who are interested in higher life, you'll hardly find one who understands the difference between the soul and the body. And out of thousands who understand the difference between the soul and the body, you'll hardly find one who doesn't want to merge and become one with the Lord, but who wants to serve the Lord in pure devotional service. And out of thousands of those, you'll find hardly one who is willing to approach a bona fide spiritual master. Tadvidi pranipranenam paripashnena. Inquire from him submissively, render service unto him, become his disciple, because the self-realized soul is one who has seen the truth, and he can impart the truth to others. It is an eternal and irrevocable fact that one cannot enter into the kingdom of God unless and until one is perfectly cleared of all sins. One cannot mix with fire until one becomes fire. Sins originate with our desire to lord it over material nature. Sins originated when we perceived our interests as divergent from the interests of the Lord. And those sins are deep-bedded, and they're practiced for who knows how many previous incarnations. We've developed patterns of thinking, patterns of behavior, patterns of desire, patterns of appetite, patterns of lust. It's very difficult to uproot those deep-seated desires for sinful activity. And the most prominent of all the deep-rooted desires of the living beings who are shackled in this material world is the desire to associate with the opposite sex. Man is looking for woman, woman is looking for man. Yan mai tunari grimeri sukamita chum. The shackles that bind us to this material world are basically the shackles of sex life. I remember listening to a tape many years ago, Ananda Maharaj illustrating this point, and he has a knack for illustrating deep philosophical points in a humorous way. He talked about someone traveling in one of these Latin American countries with a dictatorship, with revolutionaries, with regular governmental coups, with midnight knocks on the door where the mail is dragged out and found floating face down in the river the next day. Beautiful tropical countries which some or other, due to the mismanagement and the greed and the lust of mankind, have been turned into hellholes. But some or other tourist is in this country, their bodies found floating in the river every morning. People are living in shacks. The dictator has a huge palace with security forces that wear dark glasses and suck the blood of the population. People live in shacks with not even enough to eat and polluted drinking water. The tourist is wandering around in shantytown thinking about how he can get out of here. This is the worst place he's ever been. When's the next plane out? How can I extricate from this? And as he walks down a dirt street through a shantytown, he happens to look into the open doorway of one of these huts, and he sees the nicely turned ankle and foot of a young girl. And his next thought is, well, maybe it's not so bad here after all. So the power of the attraction to the opposite sex are the invisible shackles which make us rationalize the danger, the misery, the precariousness of our life in this material world and come to the conclusion, it's not so bad after all. Here's a verse, Prakash, from the 6th canto of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, 18th chapter, 30th verse. And I know that I haven't given you the verse, the chapter, and the canto consistently in this talk because I've been riffing a lot off the top of my head. But here's one, definitely, you can pin down. 6:18:30. Vilokaya kanta bhutani ado prajapati striyam chakresha dehardam yaya pumsham matya hritam. In the beginning of creation, Lord Brahma, the father of the living entities who pervade the entire universe, he saw that all the living entities were unattached. So this is kind of, it may be allegorical, it may be a fable, because we come here basically due to that attraction. But Lord Brahma is purported in this verse to have looked over his creation, looked at the living entities and saw that they were unattached, which actually makes sense because they had just recently come from the spiritual world, many of them, and they had not yet developed their attachments, just like that tourist. Initially, his reaction to that Latin America was one of great aversion, unless and until he saw that well-turned ankle. Then he became attached. So to increase population, this is another thing that Lord Brahma was intent on. He created the world and created certain archetypal progenitors called the Prajapatis, but now he needed them to populate the universe. He needed them to procreate. So at this time, he created from the better half of the man's body, the woman. The woman is always considered, in fact, that term, the woman being the better half of man, originates in the Sanskrit and from the very beginning of the universe, from the creation of Lord Brahma. So in order to attract man to woman, to keep the living entities in this material world, and to create population, Brahma created woman from man, just like we read in the Garden of Eden and the Adam and Eve story. Because a woman's behavior carries away a man's mind. Prabhupada told this story. He told this story some years ago about the astronaut, the Russian astronaut who was far out in space. He was on a moon expedition. Nobody had ever been there. He was on a horizon that no human being had ever been to. And everybody expected him to be sitting on the deck of the ship, looking out at panoramas, at vistas, at expanses of space that no human eyes had ever viewed before. So eagerly, they got him on the intercom, a walkie-talkie or whatever it is, and he said, Boris, what is it that you see? Communicate to us. What is it that you and you alone, as a first human being, is seeing? What is it that you're looking out through the windshield at? And Boris answered, I am not looking out through the windshield. I'm looking over my left shoulder out the back window just to see where is my Moscow and where is my apartment with my little Petrushka. He was thousands of miles away, but he was thinking about hearth and home. He was thinking about his little wife and her little apartment back on a little dot on a little planet called Earth, which is Moscow. And so this is the verse we've been circling around. This is 8th verse, 5th chapter, 5th canto, Srimad-Bhagavatam. This is from, again, Rishabh Dev. This really nails it. Pum sam striyami tuni bhav me tan, tayo mito ridya gantamahu, ato griha chetushu tapavitasya, jadisha mahamaham mameti. The attraction between the male and the female is the basic principle of material existence. On the basis of this misconception, because we're spirit souls, we're only embodied because of illusion, and in that embodied illusion state, we think it is of primary importance that we combine man and woman and then procreate for the survival of the species. On the basis of this misconception, which ties together the hearts of the male and the female, one becomes attracted to one's body, home, property, children, relatives, and wealth. It's a fact that single man tends to be less attached than a married man, because through the woman there are children, there's land, there are homes, there are businesses, there's bank balance, there's stock portfolio, and there's charity, there's good works, there's philanthropy as well. But it goes through the woman who expands one's consciousness and interest and involvement in matter. It doesn't really happen to that level, to that intense degree, unless and until one ties one's heartstrings with the woman. And eventually those heartstrings, which are tied together at the time of wedding, marriage, wedlock, the knot of those heartstrings becomes tighter and tighter and tighter. So tight, in fact, that one cannot, on one's own, untie that knot. It requires a sort of knowledge, this sort of detachment. Yat para pankaja palasha balaka kamaisaram gatita granti. Says no materialistic person having tied that knot can disentangle themselves from that knot by mental speculation, by yoga, by doing good works, by penances or austerities. It is only through undivided devotional service to the Lord that that knot gets untangled. Ultimately, we can't do it. Krishna's got to do it. But he expresses himself willing and ready to assist us going back home, back to Godhead. He misses us being in the spiritual world more than we miss being away. So it is explained that because of the entangling relationship between man and woman, there is the sense of illusion whereby one thinks, this man is my husband, this woman is my wife. And this is Hridaya Grantham, the hard knot in the heart, which is very, very difficult to disentangle. Impossible, in fact, for oneself. In the Satya Samhita, we find these words, Brahmaja, Yagya Valkaja, Muchante Stri Sahayana, Bojante Kechanaite Sham, Vishesham Chavido Vidur. It's not always the case that when a man combines with a woman, that they get attractive and drag them and get dragged further and further into material entanglement. It is the case in 99.9% of the time. But if the man is a devotee, and if the woman is a devotee, and if they combine together in a partnership to serve the Lord, then they can work side by side, month after month, year after year, in detachment with affection directed towards the Lord rather than towards each other's material bodies. And therefore, the translation of this verse from the Satya Samhita is that sometimes it's found that among exalted personalities like Lord Brahma and the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord, that wife and children are not a cause of bondage. On the contrary, the wife actually helps further spiritual life and liberation. I've had that experience. I've been married. We're coming on to 50 years, myself and my Bobby. We originally met as fellow travelers in a cafe in Singapore, 1970. If you actually want to know the story, maybe a few emojis would encourage me to wind things up and conclude here by telling the story of how we met more than 50 years ago. What do you think? Anybody out there listening? Okay, here we go. Thank you so much. So I was sitting in a cafe in Singapore. It was a big round table, maybe eight chairs. All right, yeah, a little delayed, but certainly robust when it came. And I was sitting there with a bunch of males. There was a guy from Denmark, guy from Germany, a couple of guys from Israel. We were all there, and there was one vacant chair at the table. And this gorgeous girl appears in the doorway. She's wearing a full dinner gown. She had a date that night and a sort of a short vest. She's looking around for a place to sit. And amongst all those like 7 guys at this table, I wanted her to sit at our table. So I popped up like Jack out of the box. And I went around, and with a flourish, I pulled the one vacant chair away from the table. And she noticed this gesture of mine. And she came over and she accepted the seat that I was offering her. Many years later, she told me, she confided in me, that her thought at that time, seeing me chivalrously pull out the chair, her thought at that time was, he would make a good husband. So we're moving on to 50 years of marriage. We haven't had children. We have got llamas, we've got peacocks. We take care of other people's children whom the parents have neglected or haven't made a connection. But it's just been, I can't tell you that. Don't think that because 99.9% of the people are shackled by sex life, don't think that it has to be that way. That can be countermanded. That tendency to become entangled and dragged down by association, man, woman, woman, and man, can be counteracted, but not easily and not on your own, but by the powerful effect of devotional service to the Lord. It is entirely possible that those whose aim is Vishnu can combine together as husband and wife, and even with children, and have a wonderfully productive, sweet, enriching, beautiful, meaningful life on the path back to home, back to Godhead. And my wife and I, of course, our lives were never complicated by children. But going back again to Ananta Rupa and his wife Arushi, Ravi Gupta, who teaches at Utah State University, who was homeschooled in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, he has 2 young boys. I don't know what their ages are, 10 and 12 perhaps. They can sit down on the Vyasasan, the elevated seat in the temple, and having themselves been educated after the footsteps of their father and their grandmother, they can give the most amazing, deeply realized, heartfelt classes on the Srimad-Bhagavatam, the beautiful story of the absolute truth, that tears will come down. And these are just young boys, 10 or 12 years old. One can't help but think of Dhruva Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, all those juveniles who were exposed since they saw the light of day, since they came, and even before they exited from the womb of their mothers, they were exposed to the powerful process of Krishna consciousness. They heard the Lord being glorified through kirtan and through japa, and they basically emerged from the womb running. They emerged from their womb with their feet on the ground, ready to do it in this life, to make a difference in their lives, to make a difference in the lives of those with whom they intersect, to make a difference in the lives of their generation, to themselves set as their aim and goal, back to home, back to Godhead, and being empowered and purified to the point where they could attract many, many other souls to go with them out of this dangerous, precipitous, miserable material world, back home, back to God. So the power of devotional service is that Yad Pada Pankaja Palashimaka Kamasinam Garita Ganati Taravam Yaseru Matori Shatagarum Tam Aranam Bhaja Vasudevam. The power of devotees engaged in the service of the Lord, cooking, cleaning the temple, communicating the philosophy, procuring, driving to Sam's Club and Costco, growing your own food, painting pictures, performing the kirtans. There are so many activities to be done in the service of the Lord under the aegis of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, which has 800 temples all over the world, that you'll just be busy, 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 busy. You won't have time to think of lusty attraction to this material world. You won't have the time or the interest to put on the crown and put on the robes, which consequently then will drag you down to the lowest region of material existence. Devotees may have opulence and prosperity come their way without working feverishly, criminally in order to achieve them, but whatever they get, they spend for the honor and glorification of the Lord and the upliftment and enlightenment of their fellow men. All glories to the transcendental devotees of the Lord, all glories to the parents and the grandparents who raised and brought them into this world and trained them from an early year. All glories to the disciplic succession, the Parampara, Prabhupada, and all our predecessors, Acharyas. All glories to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was Krishna himself, descended in order to teach by example the process of going back to home, back to Godhead. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And all glories to you all who take time out of your valuable days to be with us here on Transcendental Tuesday. Rupa Manjari, Anjali, Vaibhavi, Jimmy, and Taruni. Vinod, thank you for dropping in as well. Manasaganga, Rajdeep, I think second day in a row, isn't it? Yudha Dodo, thank you. Yudha Pratama, thanks very much. Lakshmi Nrsinga, I'm just honored. Once again, don't miss Lakshmi Nrsinga's early morning kirtans. Not a better way to start your day. Dayanidhi Haribo, Vijay. Vijay is such a pure soul. If you go to his Instagram, he's in a different part of it says God made nature, man made the city. So every chance he gets, Vijay's out amongst the stunning backdrop of autumn in Utah, hiking mountains, fording rivers. I live vicariously out in nature through him. Basu, thank you back again. Prashant, okay, we can look forward to some nice quotes today. Jean, thanks for joining us. Prashant is there always with all of the quotes and the references. Please do click on his references, make a note of all of that so that you'll have a good takeaway. Try to memorize or learn yourself one or two of these verses. Have it running through your head as you go through the day. It's an incredible boost. When you try to repeat and memorize verses, they stick with you. They become part of you. They help to develop your character. We talked about the importance of repetition. Sometimes repetition seems boring. Sometimes it's hard to do repetition. But anybody who's achieved excellence, anybody who's achieved the world-class level in athleticism or music or communication does it through repetition, consistent repetition. So please take one or two of the verses that Prashant has kindly provided for us. Try to commit it to memory. Repeat it through the day. Try to do a new verse every day. Guru Charan Singh, thank you so much. Goda, all right. Thank you, Goda, for listening. Goda's local here. Orem. Gosh, just so many people. Rishangi, thank you so much. And Rishangi always makes wonderful, insightful comments. Okay, Nrsinga, Lakshmi, can you put your links in the comment section? Several people are asking how they can access your early morning kirtans. If you would kindly provide the links And the times, also when you do your kirtan, there are several people who are interested. You won't be disappointed, I can guarantee you. Vinod, thank you for joining us. Thank you. All right. So all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all glories to the assembled devotees. Till we meet once more this week for Wisdom Wednesday, please continue to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. If you want to just do one last little flurry of emojis, I will chant one more time, an elongated version of the Maha Mantra, and you please join me as well. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.